Everyone, welcome back to our study on the prophet Amos, the shepherd from Tekoa. And we are going to conclude our large pericope today with continuing the work of God that covers Amos chapter 7, verse 1 through chapter 9, verse 10. And here's the outline of what we have already looked at and what we're going to look at. This last bullet point that we have, verses 1 through 10 of chapter 9, is split up into two bullet points that we're going to go through. So those are together, which will be in one lesson instead of two, as I originally had it. So this is part 20 of our overall study, covering Amos chapter 9, verses 1 through 10. Israel is not Yahweh, a treaty in comparisons. So if you want to pause the video here and read those verses to familiarize yourself with them, go right on ahead. Verses 1a and 4b form an incluso, which is a rhetorical device that brackets a main principle or theme within two separate lines that contain same words or phrases. Amos saw the Lord in verse 1a, and the Lord will keep his eye on them in verse 4b. So that's the bracketing incluso. These few verses use hyperbole to communicate clearly the certainty of the Lord's judgment on evil. All right, so the verses read, I saw the Lord standing by the altar, and he said. All right, that the Lord is standing by the altar implies that he has seen the quasi-religious practices they have developed and evolved, in which verses 1b through 4 indicate that since they cannot hide from the Lord, neither can what they have done be hidden. All right, so if he's standing by the altar, it's kind of like, well, he's standing right next to me, so obviously he can see what's going on. Because it's the Lord, though, like it's not this physical presence that they regard as, oh, yes, we see him, or anything like that. But what they did do was develop different idols and stuff like that. And they've even at certain points throughout Israel's history, and with Judas, they would erect different statues and whatnot. The Asherah poles, there's all these different things that were visual for the worshiper. But here's Yahweh. Since he is Yahweh, he's the Lord, he's God, they cannot physically or tangibly see him. So this whole while, they are completely ignorant of the presence of the Lord in their temple. And here he is standing by the altar, and he has seen everything that they've been doing. Now, secondly, the Lord stands by the altar because he is ready to implement his judgment starting from the heart of Israel. And what is the heart of Israel? That temple. That's what drives it. That's if the government is the fuel, the machine itself is the religion. And verse 1b, cannot hide in religion. Strike the tops of the pillars so that the thresholds shake. Bring them down on the heads of all the people. And this is alluding to the earthquake that would come in about 2 years from this point. Those who are left, I will kill with the sword. After a catastrophic earthquake, Israel would be left highly vulnerable. All right? And what would happen because of their vulnerability, other nations would take advantage of that and invade. Not one will get away, none will escape. Though there is a great use of hyperbole, this is not exaggeration. All right, I mean, there's absolutely no way to count every single citizen of Israel to see whether or not something happened to them. But this is no exaggeration. All right, this is going to happen because of everything that they've been doing. Not one will get away. Whatever the consequences are, they will not be able to escape them. Which brings us to verse 2. They cannot hide in the depths or heights. All right. So, wait a minute. You think I can't get away with things? You don't think I can escape any judgment or downfall? Nope. The verse reads, though they dig down to the depths below, from there my hand will take them. Not even in the grave can one hide from the Lord. So even if I died, he has his reaches into that as well. Though they climb up to the heavens above, from there I will bring them down. As it has been clear the entire book of Amos, they are no closer to reaching the heavenly abode. Right? So this whole time they've been trying to achieve their self-sovereignty, or whatever you might want to call it. They've tried to elevate themselves in a position that they have no place in being. And the result is, there cannot be any competition with God. And if somebody does come up against God, he's going to prove himself. All right. Now, verse 3, cannot hide in mountainous ranges or the oceans abroad. Though they hide themselves on the top of Carmel, there I will hunt them down and seize them. All right, even with the protection of thick trees and treacherous terrain, they will be found. The region of Carmel consists of over 1,000 limestone caves for hiding. And you can, they're referenced in Judges 6, verses 2, 1 Samuel 13:6, and 1 Kings 18:4. Though they hide from my eyes at the bottom of the sea, there I will command the serpent to bite them. Even the inaccessible is reachable for the Lord. All right, it's kind of humorous to me that they're like, yeah, well, what if we even hide at the bottom of the sea? Maybe they didn't say that, but maybe their mentality assumes that they can even do something dumb like that, like hide at the bottom of the ocean. How are you supposed to do that? You need to breathe. So here they are. Here's the Lord saying, you can't even hide at the bottom of the sea. There I will command the serpent to bite them. All right, the sea is where the foundations of the earth were laid. All right, and that's a reference to Jonah chapter 2, 3-6. The serpent, on the other hand, is considered a mythological creature of chaos opposed to God. And here it's kind of like he's commanding this serpent, though not defined here as mythological. It is under the Lord's complete sovereignty and can be commanded to bite them. So if this is a creature that they understood that, this is the one that opposes the Lord, and it was a very feared creature, whether it was mythological or the actual creature or whatever it might have been, this Leviathan, it was something that they thought is very, very powerful and can do very frightening things to people, especially if they're on the sea. Now, here he's saying the Lord can command that creature to bite them. All right, so they're getting a little dose, this little better understanding of who exactly this Lord is. This is going well beyond the Lord God Almighty. They should understand the name of the Lord and what that entails, but now it's getting into the actions of what that name can control and has sovereignty over. And then verse 4a, cannot hide even in exile. Though they are driven into exile by their enemies, there I will command the sword to slay them. Even those who find content in escaping the destruction left behind will only approach the sword, either in battle or execution. All right, so this is what's going to happen. They're going to be put into exile. They need to live as citizens there. And that is just like, we can't do that. We're Israelites. We cannot lower ourselves to be under the rule and reign of this other nation, the Assyrians. And even later on, when Judah is taken by Babylon, it was the same exact thing. We can't be under the control of them. And there is a lot of pride with these kings that are coming in saying, no, we want to be our own people under the Lord. And meanwhile, here's the Lord saying, settle there, live as those citizens, live as a part of those people, because if not, then how are you going to live? They're just going to take advantage of you. They're going to keep things from you. And the irony there is that this is what the upper class has been doing all the while. So now they need to be placed in this position where they need to be citizens in order to make a life, to make a living. That doesn't mean that they're completely denying the Lord's, this Yahweh, Israel's God. This is what you brought yourself to, all right? This is the bed that you made. Now this is what you need to do. If this remnant is going to honor Yahweh, you got to live the way you need to in exile. Is that I will keep my eye on them for harm and not for good. We can find contentment in knowing that the Lord has his eyes open knowing the injustices that occur everywhere. We can also find contentment knowing that we cannot hide from the Lord. Nothing can separate us from God's love. All right, so here's what's happening. This sword is going to come because, remember, God is standing at the altar. He has seen what has been going on. He knows everything that they are doing. All right, so yeah, nothing good is going to happen. I will keep my eye on them for harm and not for good. And that brings us to chapter 9, verses 5 through 10, the feats of God and Israel. With the conclusion of verses 1 through 4, the reader is left with the question, who is this God? Verses 5 and 6 answer that question and then compare Israel to God in verses 7 through 10. All right, so first, verses 5 through 6, which is the theology of Amos. All right, we gather this understanding of who God is. So we're gleaning about who God is from this source, and it is the book of Amos, this whole entire text. So our source is from how Amos is understanding the Lord. He's getting these words from Yahweh, and he's relaying them. Now we have the text of that. There's an understanding of who Yahweh is. How does Amos understand who God is? And therefore, how do we understand who God is based on how Amos understands him? All right, these two verses can easily summarize the theology of Amos. The Lord is Lord and no other, so therefore there should be no other. All right, and that includes every single citizen of Israel. They like I've said already, they've elevated themselves to this position where they don't belong. All right, they've accumulated all these riches, and as a result, they've been taking advantage of the lower class and then gained even more. They've placed themselves in a place of power that they were not executing well. People may have power. God will give it to them. But how we use that power, how the individual will use that those abilities or whatever it might be, if they're being taken advantage of or abused, then yes, something is going to change as a result. All right, so the Lord Almighty. All right, again, see chapter 3, 13 through 15 on the name of the Lord, and we mentioned that a little bit already. He touches the earth and it melts, alluding to the infamous earthquake to come once again. The infamous earthquake. It's going to come up a lot in this section. So you can refer to Psalm 104 and 144 for a little bit more on the Lord touching the earth. And the verse continues, and all who live in it mourn. That is to say, we will not be able to claim ignorance, okay? So that's not like, oh, God is angry. He's going to touch the earth and it's going to melt and it's going to make everybody mourn. No, it's what's happening is that, and all who live in it will mourn. They will mourn because they cannot claim ignorance. They're guilty, all right? What it comes down to is when the Lord visits, yes, he knows. He's been standing at that altar observing everything that the Israelites have been doing. What do we do in response to the Lord knowing? All right. The whole land rises like the Nile, then sinks like the river of Egypt. All right. And if you refer back to chapter 8, verse 8, note that God is also the deliverer. Okay. And this is what's about to develop. He builds his lofty palace in the heavens and sets its foundation on the earth. All right, the earth, in its grand magnitude, is but a mere foundation for the Lord's lofty palace. All right, and this lofty palace is difficult to translate. There is a sense of stairway connected to the word. This could be typological with the similarities to the construction of the Tower of Babel, in which the Lord descends to earth. All right, and in the study guide, in the outline that you have or may not have, I don't know if you need one. We're at the end of the lesson, but they are available. There's a footnote that I have in there that talks about a little bit about the Tower of Babel and Genesis 11, 1 through 9. So go ahead and read that. Pause it if you want to read it. It's very interesting to look at it from that angle. The text continues, he calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out over the face of the land. Now, who else can make precipitation all over the world? Okay. Yeah, we can make rain, do this at-home science project or a class assignment or something where we can make condensation, and precipitation. But what it comes down to is that magnitude, that size, to cover over that much land. He can make it happen anywhere on the earth. This is that God, and this is how Amos understands him. This is how he concludes verse 6. The Lord is his name. All right. So all this that I've been talking about, who this God is, just to clarify, the one that I've been speaking about, the Lord is his name, and that is Yahweh. To clarify, all of these feats are what the Lord can and has done. This verifies what he says he will do. All right, so now we have an understanding of the capabilities of the Lord. Who exactly is he? This is the Lord is his name. Now, going into verses 7 through 10, there's going to be a bit of a comparison. God versus Israel. Who is going to be the actual powerful one among them? So verses 7 through 10, the Israelites in comparison. Verse 7, Israel had defined future blessings based on past experiences. The Lord corrects this grave misunderstanding that past deliverance is not lasting protection. All right, so they have, and we're going to look at this, they have this idea that, because God did all this other stuff in the past, he's going to keep on doing it. He's going to always do it. Not keeping in the back of their minds or at the forefront of their minds that all this stuff that they're doing is complete rebellion of God. It's kind of like spitting in his face after he did all these miraculous things. All right. So what are some of the things that Yahweh did that they are responding in disrespect? Are not you Israelites the same to me as the Cushites, declares the Lord? Now the Lord reminds Israel that they do not have a special protective status. Did I not bring Israel up from Egypt, the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Arameans from Ker? All right, Israel is not the only one the Lord chooses to deliver. All right, so yes, he is the deliverer for all these, for Israel, but he's also a deliverer for the very people that Israelites have said, these are our enemies. In verses 8 through 9, Israel will be destroyed, but not totally. All right, now remember, deliverer. Surely the eyes of the sovereign Lord are on the sinful kingdom. This is not to assume he has not seen any good. There is the remnant, after all, okay? I will destroy it from the face of the earth, yet I will not totally destroy the descendants of Jacob, declares the Lord. Though the question remains, what will become of the remnant? Chapter 9, verses 11 through 15 will answer that question. For I will give the command, and I will shake the people of Israel among all the nations. And again, the infamous earthquake that was mentioned in 1:1. As grain is shaken in a sieve, and not a pebble will reach the ground. Now, this imagery here is brutal. All right, so let me take a moment to explain this one. Now, when you get grain and you need to shake it to sift out everything, make sure all the grains actually make it through. And what is left take for example, when you're straining out the noodles, you need to have the water come out of it in order to keep all the noodles there for yourself, okay? Now, the image is kind of flipped. We like the noodles, not the water, okay? So here, you're sifting through all of it. The grain goes through because that's what is needed. That falls to the ground, and what's left are the pebbles. So what do you do with the pebbles? You get rid of them. Now, here's Amos. He's relaying this message from Yahweh, and he says, as grain is shaken in a sieve, and not a pebble will reach the ground. That means he's going to, when the sieving is done, he will have every single pebble that is supposed to be discarded at his reach. All right. Not one will reach the ground. Not one is going to fall through with the grain. All right. And that brings us to verse 10. Israel is confident on their past experiences, ignoring and justifying their evil despite those past deliverances. All right, so, if the Lord does something for an entire nation and you grow up with that and you look at it as if like that's nothing, I can just keep on doing whatever I'm doing. There needs to be a different mindset there. The Israelites should have been, this whole time, they should have been like, hey, the Lord did amazing things, so we're going to serve that Lord. We're not going to serve any of these other things. We're not going to serve ourselves. All right. All the sinners among my people will die by the sword. Right? Since they put their trust in military prowess, they will soon enough learn they had not put their trust in the Lord. All those who say, disaster will not overtake or meet us. All right. You cannot unsay what has been said. This is their approach to the Lord. He's done amazing things, and they think that should be for all time, since we are Israelites after all. But the reality is they've completely abandoned the Lord by doing all these things that we've learned they've been doing the entire book of Amos and throughout their history. All right, and that brings us to the questions for reflection. And we looked at a little bit of the theology of Amos and how he understands the Lord, and how we understand Israel to have these different ideas of their own accomplishments, and compared to Yahweh, they're really lacking. And the idea that, whatever's going to happen, we can just escape it. Like, what bad can happen to us? But what we've already looked at in previous lessons, stuff can still happen. Even professing Christians that love Jesus Christ and have dedicated their lives to him, bad stuff still happens. I can attest to that myself. All right, I've been a Christian the majority of my life, and bad things have happened. We're not immune to it, to bad things happening. But what it comes down to is how are we going to continue to dedicate ourselves to the Lord? Are we going to ignore how we should respond to it? Are we going to ignore anything and everything that is connected to it that may or may not have caused it on our own accord? What it comes down to is, how are we going to continue to serve the Lord regardless of our circumstances, whether or not we put ourselves in them or not? Okay. So when we go through the questions for reflection, think about the theology of Amos and think about how our own theology, how it's developed. Should it be challenged, and should it be changed or altered? Whereabout have we got our understanding of who God is? All right, so now for questions for reflection. What areas of religion have influenced me to do what I am called to do? Where am I willing to go to share the gospel in comparison to where I would like to go? Am I content where I am to establish a gospel foundation no matter the circumstances? Am I aware and content with God keeping his eyes on me? Does the theology of Amos align with my own theology? Who am I compared to God? What hope do I have knowing God preserves in the midst of his judgment? What doubts do I have about God's promises? Do I ever say or think of opposite outcomes because of these doubts? What causes me to have the doubts? All right, thank you for listening in, and hope to see you out there. God bless.